More questions, if you guys don't mind, bear with me here. Ms. Ayala, can you share with us, I know we're in an unclassified setting, the presence of TCOs within the United States, within the 50 states? I mean, I've seen some different numbers out there about how many cities we have a pretty significant presence of cartel activity and operatives. Can you just share your perspectives on that at the unclassified level?
Well, I probably can't really go into the numbers and specifics of city by city, but what I can tell you is that our strategy is to pursuing every element of those transnational criminal organizations from a network point of view, whether they're in China, coming up through the southern border and approaches through the border and into, Chicago, Detroit, or wherever that is. That we're looking at all of the sources of supply, the distribution, the transportation networks, and putting that together and looking at supply chain investments and seeing how we can look for vulnerabilities in their actions along the entire crime spectrum to be able to then pursue some enforcement action against them. So they're everywhere. We have transnational criminal organizations in every city across the United States, and we're working to minimize the impact in all those cities.
Is there anything that we can do, that Congress can do to help your activities to combat cartel activity within the 50 states?
Well, I think that when we look at individual agency missions and goals and some of the infrastructure that we build to support that, sometimes we look at it in stovepipes. So, for instance, when we're looking at the hiring of special agents for criminal investigations, we often forget that we really need, forensic auditors and financial experts and other analysts and other missions to support that effort. And even if we were able to take on everything we wanted without prioritization, we would still need more assistant U.S. attorneys and more infrastructure in the court systems to be able to support those investigations. So I think looking at a holistic approach to what hiring 10 Border Patrol agents or Office of Field Operations or Coast Guard would require as far as investigators and all of the support infrastructure as a whole, I think would help in our endeavor.
Great, thanks. Back to just overall effectiveness of the JTF so far. Can each of you, can you think of an example, I know we're in an unclassified setting, of a case or a mission or something that you saw now that we have JTFs that show that JTFs are effective? Like, had we not had this new construct, perhaps you wouldn't have been able to operate in a way that impacted a specific mission. Like, can you give any examples that actually show that what we're doing here is increasing effectiveness?
So what I was going to say, we're filling 3 distinct gaps in DHS capabilities, things that we are doing now that weren't available for, that we developed jointly, most of us together in our integrated teams. So in the past, DHS lacked a mechanism to prioritize the top transnational criminal networks, and now we have. We developed the home court process, and the deputies of all of the components and the task force directors and the heads of all of the investigative services are on there. We also lacked a way to consistently tie together and manage all of the investigations, operations, arrests related to a criminal network. And we were able to develop that, which is comprehensive criminal network analysis, which we did not have before in the department. And we also were able to develop national case coordination, which now manages that and is able to coordinate across the entire domain and spectrum. And the main thing, thirdly, though, is that we've been able to focus on the investigative process of work, which we really necessarily did not before, and the criminal investigative process, and looking for ways to support that through technology and weaknesses. So this enables us to have better cross-programmatic and cross-domain visibility. And our strength is in the interagency team and the broad knowledge that they're bringing together to the national centers. Because of that, we've been able to do things like not looking at ways of maybe couching future metrics, but in ways of value-added statements. Like, for instance, like in a human trafficking investigation and network that we assisted in and did comprehensive criminal network analysis, we were able to expand the knowledge of the network by 200% in half of the time, which builds in all those efficiencies and man hours. And in addition, that resulted in tripling the number of indictments or more than tripling, from 10 to 12 to 38. And how does that matter? Because then now it's harder to reconstitute itself, And in this case, because it was human trafficking, obviously prevented people to continually be victimized or create larger victims. And I can go on in many different
No, that's
areas,
great,
but,
thank you. So you're a fan of the JTFI organization, it sounds like.
I'm a fan of my team
Yeah.
and the support that I receive from my executive agent and my
Right.
partners in W and East that support those efforts.
Commander Beeson?
I always forget that button. I think that a couple of examples for me come to mind. Most recently in Arizona, a capacity was needed by the team out there in order for them to further their investigative efforts. So that capacity request came into Joint Task Force West. It was then sourced out, and then we did source it also to Joint Task Force I. They have been able to meet the capacity request, and so they'll be getting that resource down to Arizona, if it's not there already, for them to utilize. And I think that that's something that prior to the task forces, that probably would have gone just up one particular stovepipe and might not have been met. But I do think it was met. Additionally, I think of some, bringing together, bringing in Citizenship and Immigration Services into the task force has enabled us to identify, very recently, within the last couple of weeks, individuals who were pending immigration benefits in the U.S. that we know were engaged in narcotic smuggling in Mexico. And they're not going to get those benefits now. And that's, to me, something that certainly adds value.
That's great. Admiral Schultz?
Chairwoman, I would tell you in a couple places. First and foremost, I think our DHS partners have collaborated well in the past. I think we have upped that game. We are able to bring in capabilities and capacities from outside regional locations towards better end effect against transnational criminal organizations. Our recent efforts in Puerto Rico, where we linked in DOD linguists, we linked in DOD analysts, we brought in P3 support that wouldn't normally support that vector. In the Western Hemisphere Initiative, Illicit Pathway Initiative I talked about, in Central America, we are fielding a capability with partner nations where they can enroll migrants moving up through the Central American corridor. We can enroll them. We have biometrics as they move across, they leave the Indian Ridge, they show up in the Darien, the jungle regions there, they move through the Darien into Costa Rica and up the chain. We enroll them, the partners see that as they move up, their stories change. You start to dial in on what are those folks with these changing stories. At what point do we need to get a partner nation lashing up with the U.S. law enforcement folks to figure out who that person really is before they present at the southwest border? So I think there's many places. I use the metric that when I reach out to my DHS partners in the field and they say, hey, we want more support from you, to me, that's the greatest testament. We're building relationships and they're asking for more support to be more effective in their work.
Great, thank you.